I'm Dennis Burns from Woodsongs in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to our 7th video in our musicianship series. This one is called Riding the Rhythmic Wave. I suppose I could have given it a much simpler title, which would be less exotic, which really would be The Basics of Rhythm, because we have yet to talk about rhythm in this series. We've just talked about notes, we've talked about the musical alphabet, half steps and whole steps, how a chord is built, why is it major, why is it minor. But the two fundamental elements of music are pitch and rhythm, right? Pitch is notes, low notes, middle range notes, high notes. Rhythm is how those notes are used in time against a steady beat. So that's equally as important as the notes themselves, and in some respects even more important. So we should talk about that a bit. And the reason I want to get into this is because the last lesson I was talking about improvisation, and I started you all on improvisation, and I got a lot of responses from people saying, "Oh my God, you threw me in the deep end of the pool. I have no idea what to do. I sound terrible. I'm never going to learn to improvise," etc. So maybe I did throw you into the deep end a little bit, and I appreciate your feedback. So we're going to go to some rhythmic basics. And then once you understand those basics of rhythm, if you ride that wave of rhythm as you're playing, you're going to sound pretty good, I can guarantee you, with just a little bit of practice. You won't sound great right off the bat, but it's definitely doable. But before I do that, I had a few questions that came up. Students asked me these questions. I got a few emails as well. The first one, and this one came from a number of people: why should I learn all this stuff that you're showing me? What's the advantage? Why should I do it? Well, you don't have to do it. It's totally your call. My feeling is you can choose between, in studying music, knowledge or ignorance. It's really that simple. You can choose to consciously study your instrument. Why are these notes what they are called? Why is this chord the way it is? It'll help you understand the instrument better, and you'll end up playing the instrument better. You'll end up learning songs faster. So I don't think there's any downside of it. There's this other side where people take up musical instruments and they strum them, and they're just like, oh, it's such a magical sound and it's so wonderful. And I don't want to destroy that magic with analytical knowledge of music. Don't worry about it. It's still magical. Even when you study it in detail, that won't go away. I can guarantee you that. I was watching an interview with Pat Metheny. There was actually a master class, and he was talking about the time he had spent working with Joni Mitchell in the 70s. Pat Metheny is one of the great jazz musicians of our time. He's a guitarist. Joni Mitchell, of course, is a great songwriter. And Joni Mitchell said to him, he said, I don't want to know anything about those chords. I don't want to know what they're called. I don't know what the theory is. Don't tell me any of that stuff, because I don't want it to break my creative flow. And it was interesting. Metheny's response to that was, well, I kind of thought that was a cop-out. He felt it was, just an excuse not to have to do the work to learn this stuff. So, it's your call, of course, but I'm assuming since you're here, you want to learn this stuff. You want to advance your knowledge of music and of the fretted instrument that you're playing. Okay. Somebody asked me, I said in the last video, the diminished 7 chord, the B diminished chord in the last video, I said it was hidden inside the G7 chord. And somebody wrote to me and said, you didn't explain that. Can you explain that? So yeah, I'll explain that real simply. If you take a look at our virtual keyboard, as you remember, the G chord is played with a G, a B, and a D, the root, the third, and the fifth, starting on G. G, B, and D. A B diminished chord starts on a B note, going every other note, building in thirds, B, D, and F. When we play a G7 chord, we do a root, a third, a fifth, and a seventh. So we have a 4-note chord. We go G, B, D, F, and as you can see, that B diminished chord, the B, D, and F, are the top 3 notes of the G7 chord. Okay? So that's what I meant by saying it was hidden inside it. And by the way, the 7th chord is important. It's used a lot, and that diminished chord creates a lot of tension, and that tension needs to resolve. It usually resolves down to the 1 chord. But this G7 sound, songs like, right, that riff by Roy Orbison in the song Pretty Woman, that's a G7 chord. Beatles, right? The riff they play from the song Birthday, that's based on a G7 chord. And within that chord, there's a B diminished chord. Okay, hope that answers that question. Third thing is, I got a lot of feedback of people just saying, I have no idea how to improvise. You expect me to just jump in and start playing music. It's not that easy. Well, that's why we're talking about rhythm today. If you ride the rhythmic wave that I'm going to talk about with practicing improvising, I think you'll find good results almost very quickly. So I'll break it down to its most basic element and show you some exercises you can do so that when you are improvising, you're always riding that wave of rhythm that's below you. So everything will kind of be more naturally musical, I think. Okay? But before we do that, before we talk about rhythm, we should talk about something else we have yet to talk about. So take a look at my iReal Pro app here of Jambalaya, the chart of the Hank Williams song we talked about in the last lesson. Excuse me. Notice at the top left it says 4/4. That is called your time signature. This is called 4/4 time. This is also written sometimes as a letter C, meaning common time, meaning this is the most common time signature there is. So if you see a letter C instead of 4/4, it means the same thing. What we mainly want to pay attention to is that top number, the number 4. What that is saying, there are 4 beats to a measure. Okay? The bottom number we're going to ignore for the moment. So let me go down here below letter A where you see the C chord. So what is a measure? A measure is created by 2 bar lines. A bar line is a vertical line going this way. There's one on the left and one on the right. The space in between is a measure or a bar. So here's my bar line here on the left. Here's my second bar line on the right. The space in between is called a measure. This time signature is telling me there are 4 beats in that measure. Okay? The term measure is used by classical musicians. It's also used in the popular music world. Jazz musicians tend to lean towards using the word bar. First bar, second bar, third bar. That means a measure. So that's the same thing. Okay? So that's just some basic stuff. So if somebody says, hey, let's start in the 3rd bar of the 2nd line, they're saying, let's start on that G7 chord there. If somebody says, let's start on the 3rd measure of the 2nd line, same thing. Okay? So that's just really fundamental notation stuff that's important to understand. Okay, so now let's move on to learning the rhythmic symbols and what they mean. If you look at my computer here, the top note, this symbol right here, so a hollowed out circle, right, with no stem falling from it, that's called a whole note. Just think of a pie, right? A whole pie. That gets the whole measure in 4/4 time, so that is equal to 4 quarter notes. So it's simply 1, 2, 3, 4. If I play a single note for 4 beats, it's this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are whole notes. If I strum a G chord for a whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I strum on beat 1, I let it ring through the duration of beats 2, 3, and 4. Of course, the notes on a guitar and a plucked instrument, they die away as you play them. So it may not make it all the way to the 4th beat, or it may, depending on the speed of the song. Okay? So that's a whole note. Real simple. Below that, we have the symbol for a half note. And notice there's 2 of them, because each line on this page is supposed to represent 4 beats. So this one gets beats 1 and 2. This one gets beats 3 and 4. So the bottom line is, remember, a half note gets 2 counts in 4/4 time. Now, it doesn't always fall on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It might fall on beats 2 and 3. It all depends on how the music is written out for you. So the way I recommend you practice these rhythms, turn on a metronome, set a very slow tempo, just mute the strings of your fretted instrument, like this. Just put your left hand lightly on the strings. If you're pressed too hard, you'll get that sound. So just barely touch the strings. Just strum with your hand, whatever strumming technique you use. Turn on the metronome to a steady, slow beat. I have a metronome set at 86. So there's my 4 beats of the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. And you notice on 1, the metronome is doing a higher pitched sound. Practice a whole note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then go to a half note. Strum every 2 beats. Strum on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to whole note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch to half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the next one down the column. So we're basically dividing each of these values in half. We divide a half note in half, we get a quarter note. And to make up 4 beats, we need 4 of them in 4/4 time. Same process. Just turn on your metronome. 2, 3, 4. Okay? Then again, mix up all the rhythms. For example, play half notes, quarter notes, whole notes, quarter notes, half notes, quarter. Okay, get the idea? Next level down, we divide a quarter note in half, we get eighth notes. And these are beamed together to represent each beat of the 4 beats. So there's your first beat, here's your second beat, there's your third beat, and your 4th beat. So how do we count these? We count the first 8th note as the beat number, 1. The second 8th note, we say the word and, 1 and. 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. That would be how this line would be pronounced in time. So think about the beat. If this is the floor and this is my foot, 1, 2, 3, 4. For my hand to repetitively go down and hit the floor, it has to come up, right? That up is the and. That's called the upbeat. So 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. So if I had another surface up here when I came up, 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. That's called the upbeat. Okay? Below that is 16th notes. We're not going to use that today, but I'll just show it to you. You divide an eighth in half, you get a 16th. 4 of those make up 1 beat. And those are counted the beat number first, 1, and then E and A. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Okay? So those are 16ths. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to randomly change. I'm going to turn on my metronome between these different rhythms. I'm just going to strum the guitar. Okay? You could do it with single notes. You could pluck a single string. You could tap a tabletop. Whatever works. Be inventive. All right, here we go. Whole notes. 2, 3, 4. Half notes. Quarter notes. Eighth notes. Quarter. Eighth. Quarter. Half. Whole note. 2, 3, 4. So one thing about strumming, when I went to the eighth notes, you noticed I was still using downstrokes. That's because it was comfortable enough for me to use downstrokes. At a certain speed, that will no longer work. But you can use downstrokes as long as it's comfortable. At some point, it's more efficient to use the upstroke. So for example, on my eighth notes, I have two options at this speed. I can do this, or I can do down and up. Okay, the musical result is a little different with down and ups. The down sounds stronger, the up sounds a bit lighter. It has more of a pulse to it. All downstrokes has more of a driving rhythm to it. Right? If it was, you know, punk rock or heavy metal, downstrokes might be more appropriate. But don't worry about what technique should I use. That's just something for later on down the line. Okay? So that's a really good exercise to do to understand your rhythms. Okay? So something else on a side note this brought up. This idea of muting your strings and just strumming rhythms against a metronome, it's really valuable to do that when you're learning to play and sing songs. A lot of people learn their chords and then they want to start singing with it, and they feel overwhelmed by, God, I can't do all this. I can't do this strum pattern. I can't do this chord fingering and sing the right words and sing the right melody with my voice. Three things going on at once. So it's a great idea to put on a recording of a song. Could be a Beatles song like Let It Be. Listen to the music, mute your strings, get in time with the music, feel the beat. Wherever you feel the beat is, try to identify where the quarter note is. And just play along with it. Let Paul McCartney sing, and you just stay with this. You just go, when I find myself in times of trouble, right? So those are quarter notes. But you could do that with whole notes, for example. Let me turn the metronome back on. So my whole note would be, and then with the song, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Okay, there's whole notes. Let's try half notes. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Let's go to quarter notes. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Right, so that's a great exercise. Just put on a recording of music you enjoy. Mute your strings, strum along with it, sing it. It really gets it into your bones. And when you're doing it by yourself, especially with a metronome and you're starting out doing this, sometimes you have to round off words. For example, you need to sound a little more robotic. Place the words more squarely on the beats, even though you know maybe that's not how it sounds. For example, when I find myself in, instead of singing it, when I find myself in, right? Paul McCartney does not sing it like a robot. When I find myself in times of trouble. But when you first start playing and singing, you may need to do that, and you just take one step at a time. So work through whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, perhaps eighth notes, and that'll get you started with that. Okay, so now how do we apply some of these rhythmic principles to jambalaya and improvising? Okay, and also a side note, some people have said to me, I don't know if I want to learn to improvise. Well, why do I need to learn that? Well, you don't need to learn it, of course, but it's fun. This is Colorado. People get together in campgrounds and play music together. They have jam sessions all in the area. And it's nice to be able to play a song and have somebody look at you and say, you want to take a solo? And you just take it and you improvise something. The thing about improvising is you never really know what's going to come out until you do it. So it's kind of exciting. There's a risk factor involved. And yeah, at first you might not sound that great, but if you hang with it, it can be a lot of fun. So most people I find that stick with it are really glad they did, and it just teaches you another aspect of music that I think is really enjoyable. And the old classical composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, they were known to be fantastic improvisers. So it's not just something from the popular and jazz music world or folk world. It really has a tradition, way back into classical music. So here's what we'll do now is let's here we are in iReal Pro with Jambalaya. Let's loop. Remember, you drag your mouse. We're going to loop this section, and it's just going to play in a circle for me. So let's listen to the rhythm for a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the quarter note, right? That's important to identify that. Get in sync with that. So now what we could do, first exercise might be just to play the note that is named by the chord. Just play a C note, and I'm sure you know where a C note is now. It could be this C on the guitar. This is true on any instrument. Just find your C note, or low C. When it changes to G, change to a G note. Stay with the beat. Just get a nice, nice relaxed beat going, like this. 2, 3, 4, C. Go to a G. Okay, you're now riding the rhythmic wave of the song. It's really that simple. It's not that exciting sounding, of course. So what could we do next? Well, let's mix up some rhythms. Let's stay with a C note, and let's play half notes and then some quarter notes. Quarter notes, half notes, quarter notes. Right? Still not very exciting. That's okay. Let's try some eighth notes. Just C and G note. Sorry. 2, 3, 4. Quarter notes. Eighth. Quarter notes. Eighth. So now I need to talk about eighth notes for a moment. There's two kinds of eighth notes. There's straight eighth notes, which are equidistant apart. Bum, 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 like in a driving rock and roll rhythm. Those are straight eighth notes. There's swing eighth notes, which have the first eighth note is longer and the second one is shorter in turn. This feel, this Cajun beat, is swing. If somebody says swing it more and you're strumming eighth notes and you're doing this, they really want this. So it has a little bit of a gallop to it. Long, short, long, short, long, short. There's all different degrees of swing. That is called swinging eighth notes. There's no such thing as swinging quarter notes. You have to have the eighth note in order to swing it. Some people swing much harder than others. Some are more exaggerated. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, ba. Some songs are more like that. Some are less exaggerated. Bum, 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 bum. It can be very subtle. So this tune, as I'm hearing it, these are swing eighth notes. So when I play my eighth notes, I'm going to have that bounce. Okay? Now, let's do some different notes now, so I'm not always stuck with that C and G, which is really annoying. So I'm going to do the same principle. Now I'm only going to use notes of the chord. So when it's a C chord, I'm only going to play a C, E, or a G. I'll do my best not to play anything else. But I'm going to mix up the rhythms. I'm going to start with maybe half notes or quarter notes. I'm going to stay with those a while. Then I'm going to switch maybe to a whole note, maybe then a half note, but I'm still going to ride that rhythmic wave that's being presented to me by the music, okay? And I'll try to narrate a little bit as I go. Quarter notes. Eighth notes. Oh, sorry, I did chord notes, sorry, scale notes. I'm supposed to stay with chords. One more time. Only chord notes. C. So you see it's starting to make a little more musical sense. I'm just riding on that beat. That's always my guide. If I'm always in sync with that beat, the quarter note, or thinking of the half note, or thinking of eighth notes, it sounds like I'm in sync with the music. Now, what's missing from my improvisation so far is I'm only using chord notes. And there's a problem with that. I'm agreeing too much with the chords that are being played behind me. Music is tension and release. You have to have tension. I have yet to introduce any tension. So if a C chord is being played behind me by the piano player or the guitar player, whatever, they're playing C's, E's, and G's. If I only play C's, E's, and G's, I'm agreeing with them too much. I'm not creating any tension. So if I throw in an F note against that C chord, that will create tension. If I throw in a D against that C chord, that will create tension. If I throw in an A, that'll create tension as well. And so it's this balance of tension and release. So feel free to introduce tension. Generally, when you end an idea, you end a musical phrase, try to land on a note in the chord for the time being. Let it release, okay? So let me demonstrate that now. So I'll still use a lot of chord notes, but I'll also introduce notes of the scale. But I'm going to still ride the beat. That's the main objective here. So that A was not in the G chord, but I resolved to G afterwards. There's the A. The beat. So there was an example of a series of what they call suspensions. I was playing against a C chord, C, E, and G, but I went A down to G. I resolved to the note of a C chord after a note not in the chord. And then D to C, which is not in a C chord, but then I resolved to C. And then I played an F note, and I resolved to an E, which is in the C chord as well. So that's a series of suspensions, you could call them. And that works really nicely against a C chord. So that's just some ideas for you to work with. So it's a lot simpler material than at the last lesson, but it'll help you get started with the whole improvisational process. And of course, you need to do it regularly. Some days you'll sound great. Some days you'll sound awful. That's all there is to it. That's part of the learning experience. One more thing I want to mention. Another way to practice improvising, as far as rhythm goes, you could take the song Jambalaya the way Hank Williams sings it, and listen to his voice in your mind as you're playing the song. Try to imagine him singing it. And play other notes in the scale in the place of where he sings. In other words, you don't have to get his notes. You don't have to do that, but you want to imitate that rhythm anywhere with any notes in the scale or any arpeggio notes. So I'll give you an example of that. So for example, goodbye Joe, me gotta go. All right, so if I want to imitate that, here, let's turn on iReal Pro. I'll just try it along with it. Hang on, let's start from scratch. And I'm going to crank up the tempo a little bit faster. This is a little slow for me. So let's just give it a go. Intro. Goodbye, Joe. You gotta go. Me, oh, my, oh. So that's what he sings, right? Me gotta go. Pull the P-road down the bayou. Now I'm going to play those same rhythms, but with something else. playing basically when he's singing. So I'm using his phrasing, goodbye Joe, and then I take a little breath. Me gotta go, I play something in that space, take a breath. So I'm using his singing as a template to improvise, to suggest rhythms for me to play in my solo. So I hope that was clearer than the last lesson or less challenging. Feel free to write me and let me know if you'd like me to cover anything else. Okay, thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.